After two middling seasons of The Rings of Power, I was genuinely ready to tap out on all things Middle-earth. And then they told me the War of the Rohirrim is an anime.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
My name is Ren, and this is my review of The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. Welcome back, film family. Thank you for joining me as we journey back to Middle-earth 183 years before the events in Peter Jackson's timeless Lord of the Rings trilogy, where Wulf, a ruthless and clever Dunlending lord, I still have difficulty saying that word, seeking vengeance for the death of his father, forces Helm Hammerhand and his people to make a daring last stand in the ancient stronghold of the Hornburg. Finding herself in an increasingly desperate situation, Héra, the daughter of Helm, must summon the will to lead the resistance against a deadly enemy intent on her people's destruction. And full disclosure, this will not be the review you go for to understand how loyal and faithful this adaptation is to Tolkien's original writings. I am not a Tolkien expert whatsoever. I enjoy Peter Jackson's original trilogy. I like two of the Hobbit's films more than most, and like I said at the top of this video, I've not been vibing with the Rings of Power at all. But the fact that we are getting a major blockbuster Hollywood release anime movie that just so happens to be set in a fantastical fantasy world, and this film doesn't just look old school, it feels old school in both its praises and its faults. This is a film that just looks like a classic Ghibli film. It obviously takes a lot of elements from Peter Jackson's original trilogy, but it also brings in a lot of Kurosawa elements, a lot of storytelling tropes and elements from the East, and I was all for that. The film is directed by Kenji Kamiya, and while that may be a name you're not immediately familiar with, in fact, I wasn't immediately familiar with, but turns out I am familiar with his work. He has directed a ton of anime in Japan, including a lot of the subsequent Ghost in the Shell sequel anime series that follow the classic 90s film. And there's a lot of that spectacle, that scale, and that interesting storytelling sensibility that he brings into this film. Because while there is aesthetic familiarity to, obviously, the Lord of the Rings and other films set on Middle-earth, this is a story that moves and flows at its own pace. It doesn't feel like you're watching a film with no identity. He immediately stands out in even how he structures the story, with how he uses flashbacks and how he expands the lore through the characters. And The War of the Rohirrim is a film that aesthetically is very specific and distinct from anything else, while echoing classic animated movies from Hayao Miyazaki and live-action movies from Akira Kurosawa. This is a film that, while the characters and even the world are designed in 2D, it is animated in 3D with CG animation, and that may cause a bit of a visual whiplash for some viewers. I know it certainly did for me, and we'll discuss it further along in this video, but it is a striking image, especially when you have grand action sequences, when you have violence on screen, which this film surprisingly doesn't go too hard on. It feels like it really wants to, but perhaps budget, perhaps studio mandates, the violence was a bit taken away, and that does strip a bit of the impact of certain sequences. But this is a film that looks immense. You feel that scale, that volume of immenseness that you have in Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings, but now you have this breathtaking animation bringing you into this world, and it makes it feel entirely new. And from one action set piece to the next, there is a real sense of cause and effect. So it's not just action happening for the sake of action. It's earned as much as it is when characters make stupid mistakes, and there are a frustratingly amount of stupid decisions made by characters in this film. But Those characters make stupid decisions, they pay the consequences. They play stupid games, they win stupid prizes. That doesn't mean this is a film deprived of absolutely metal moments. There is a particular sequence in this film with Helm Hammerhand kicking so much ass, it's the most metal fucking thing I've seen all year. My jaw was dropped. I was in awe of what I was witnessing. And Brian Cox does an excellent job voicing the King of Rohan. Everyone else, really, the entire cast is stellar all around, whether it is bringing just these specific characters to life, but even in their pronunciations, the way they speak, it feels ancient and distinct. It's not from our world, and the way they just elaborated on this dialogue to feel distinct helps you be immersed into this world. Unfortunately, while the characters start out promising, there is a lot of broad characterizations, but the film doesn't dive much deeper into the characters from there. When it comes to Héra and Wulf, our protagonist and antagonist, respectively, there is so much promise in the first act where the film explores their dynamic and we're given sort of a version of the Romeo and Juliet dynamic, two people, longtime friends, warring on opposite sides of the battlefield, and the War of the Rohirrim somehow wastes all the promise in their dynamic, where Wulf is set up as a compelling, flawed, relatable antagonist, and we don't get to spend any time with him throughout this film. There are small scenes where he's strategizing the next step in their battle plan, but he just comes across as a stupid, stubborn, one-note evil. While Héra gets so much development where from the beginning she is not like her father. She doesn't want to be like her father, and we've seen this archetype before. We've seen this archetype in The Lord of the Rings, which is why they're kind of even telling this story within The Lord of the Rings. There are quite a few references to the original trilogy, to The Hobbit, to more of Tolkien's works in Middle-earth, and some of them can come across as gratuitous or even egregious. Is just the connecting thread that feels so obvious, but no one was asking for these threads to be included. This is a great character. She has such a striking look. There is such a compelling character's journey that she has to go on. But a lot of what made that compelling is the contrast between her and Wulf and the different paths and directions they take on life. To the point where the conclusion of this film feels logical, feels predictable because it's the direction the film was always going for, but it doesn't feel as impactful as it could have been emotionally speaking. Again, I don't know if this is Tolkien's writing, I don't know if this has anything to do with Tolkien lore, I generally don't know. I am just talking about the film. And while the film does have interesting enough characters, compelling enough characters, there is just a lack of depth to them. Where as you dive into the second half of the film, what doesn't help either is that the film, while it has these unforgettable heavy metal moments, it also has plenty of cheesy, predictable, and eye-rolling ones. As much as I adore a certain sequence with Helm Hammerhand, I had so many questions about his stupidity. This film even starts going because people are stupid and refuse to talk, and this happens throughout the entire film. Outside the big action set pieces in the film, the animation always looks restrained. And I don't want to say cheap because the animators clearly put their heart and souls into this. I'm specifically saying restrained because it feels like a budgetary decision. It feels like a producerial decision where all the money has to be spent on the battle sequences. And everything else, there are moments where the characters' movements look stiff. And again, this feels purposeful because of how much money you see on screen, how much of a polished production this clearly is. And that lets down those more intimate character moments where it could be just as visually breathtaking as when everyone is throwing their swords around. This is a film that, because of that 3D animation with 2D character designs, there's just something that it almost feels like the uncanny valley, but all in animation. It feels like there's just something lacking, impeding this film from reaching its full potential and be as timeless as Peter Jackson's original trilogy. That said, I'm an anime guy. I'm a fantasy guy. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't enjoy this. I'm not going to pretend like I would be on board for more adventures in this world, following this story with these characters to see if they could develop more. The War of the Rohirrim underwhelms if you're looking for a film to capture that timeless magic of the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and Return of the King. But it is an exciting new approach to tell more Middle-earth stories. And personally, again, as someone who's never been the biggest fan of this specific fantasy world, I'm personally on board for what might come next. But those are just my thoughts on The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. It's time for you to start the conversation about it in the comments below. Are you excited for The War of the Rohirrim? What is your favorite Lord of the Rings movie? And what is a Middle-earth story you would love to see captured on the big screen? Anything and everything down there. If you're enjoying this review, there's many more like it right up here, and I will have more coming soon. So if you want to stick around, talk more movies and TV with me, this is the place to be. Consider clicking that subscribe button, and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim is an epic spectacle of classic animation, but one that is as exciting as it is frustrating. So many of its technical elements are inspiring achievements, but its story and characterizations beg to be elevated by another revision. I'm giving The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim a B. Thank you so much for watching, Film Family. Remember to start the conversation about The War of the Rohirrim in the comments below. What is a film franchise you would love to see made into an anime film? I really want to know your answer for this one. Start chiming in the comments below, and I'll be back very soon with another review. So until the next one, love each other and love the movies.